be in the book of Daniel. So if you have your Bible, now we're still reading, I know we're reading Ezekiel, but I feel like this is a book we're pretty familiar with, right? Kind of, sort of, somewhat. And I think we're going to have a great time in this one. Why don't we start by everybody looking over at them? No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. It just had that awkward thing that I did there, and I did that, not you, not at all. It might have been on purpose. It might not have been. Okay, so why don't we start with, why don't you tell me what you know about the book of Daniel? Okay? What do you know about the book of Daniel? Yes. Okay, he trusted the Lord no matter what. Yes, ma'am. Okay, yeah, and I'm going to extend that. The second half of the book of Daniel is very prophetic. It's very much about last days, very much. Next week we're going to look at that in more detail. We have 2 weeks in Daniel. You can thank Carlos for that. He set that up, so he made sure we had more time in this book. So today we'll focus on the narratives of Daniel. Next week we'll focus on a little bit more of the prophetic nature of it. So what else do you know? Yes, sir.
Written when he was in Babylon?
Yeah, he wrote this when he was in Babylon. One of the very few books. It's an exile book. So an exilic book, we would call this. Ezekiel was an exile book, and so is Daniel. Daniel wrote this in exile. He what? His diet, the Daniel diet, I was like, I thought, oh, yeah, that's awkward, isn't it? Yeah. Here goes a kids pastor to be like, yeah, that can't go. Fire the middle school pastors right now. I'm just kidding. It's his brother. So, just kidding, that's fun. The ironic thing was I heard a little kid scream and then Victor walked in, and that was the awkward part right there. It was like, wait, what's happening right now? So, okay, yes, the Daniel diet, right? Okay, we'll talk about that today. There's a specific kind of a diet that Daniel ate, and we'll talk about why and what that was. Yeah, very good. What else? I mean, come on, guys. Lion's Den? Hello? Lion's Den? Do we want to talk about lions? Okay, yes, ma'am, and then yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. Yeah, because he was able to, God gave him interpretation of a dream. He saved a ton of people's lives. Absolutely true. Yep, we'll talk about that some more today too. Yeah, Oturo. Great lesson. Wherever you are, Lion's Den, Babylon, God's with you. Yes, ma'am. Okay, we look at the life of Nebuchadnezzar and kind of like, is it possible that he's actually in heaven? Yeah, and the answer is it's very possible. Yes, ma'am. Yeah, the 3 men in the fire, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, right? Anything else? By the way, say again? The lions didn't eat him. They did not. I think they ate some other people afterwards, but not him. Yeah. Hey, by the way, for families, no need, you're fine. But we did turn on the video camera in the family room. If for whatever reason you need it, go to the family room, it's on. So you don't feel pressure that you have to. If you don't have kids and you get up and go in there, you're ridiculous. No, it's kidding. Lisa was about to get up and leave, so this is what I have to deal with. No, it's kidding. Okay, so the book of Daniel, fantastic book. Nebuchadnezzar is the leader of, at least in ancient history, like in the recordings of history, arguably he is the first world leader, like an empire. Now, that is not a true statement post or a-biblical. Like outside, I mean, you could take the Chinese dynasties that were honestly maybe more land and more, but in terms of like the Bible's interaction with empires, Babylon stands as first. And the Bible and Daniel, we'll get there next week, but the book of Daniel is unique in that it traces the major world empires through history. And he's going to even describe them in different kind of forms. But the empires are, the Babylonians were really first, the first kind of organized empire. Not of tribes, but of one group working together. After them comes, anybody know who comes after the Babylonians? The Medo-Persian Empire. Darius, Cyrus, okay. After that, what's the next empire? There's a third empire that Daniel mentions. The Greek Empire, right? Philip of Macedon, of course, Alexander the Great. The fourth empire is Rome. The fourth empire mentioned is Rome, and then he mentions a fifth empire. What'd you say? Yeah, well, but even before that, yeah, you're right. But there's a kind of a fifth one that he mentions, and that's a hybrid end times empire. And it's part Roman and kind of a mixture of a whole bunch of other things. We'll talk about that. So Babylonians, there will be a test on your way out. If you can't say it, you don't leave. No, just kidding. Just kidding. Come on. But the reason I'm saying it is because you're getting to trace kind of ancient history. Babylonians, Medo-Persians, Greeks, Romans, and then the last days. Okay, now obviously since then there have been other great empires. Probably the most significant empire not mentioned in the Bible. Anybody think of I mentioned the Chinese dynasty, but arguably the greatest empire, is not America, not even close actually. It's the British Empire. It's the British Empire. There's very little argument. They ruled the world, literally most of the world, versus most of these empires. Babylon was a huge empire. Nebuchadnezzar was absolute supreme ruler, but it was a particular area, not the whole thing. So the book of Daniel opens with Daniel. Okay, any idea, by the way, anybody want to take best guesses of so Nebuchadnezzar comes into Babylon. We already know when he does it, 606, 592, 586, and then he just kind of ends the Jerusalem-Israel experiment, and he sends a lot of them into exile. This is when Ezekiel was taken. This is when many of the governors or kings of Israel, of Judah, were either their eyes plucked out and sent off, or they were banished or whatnot. And in this time, some point in this time, Daniel was taken to Babylon, which tells us what about Daniel? What do we learn? If Daniel's taken into exile, what can we assume about Daniel? Well, he definitely lived in Babylon longer. But why would the Babylonians take Daniel? There's some assumptions you can make here as to why Daniel is in Babylon. He's obviously from a very intelligent, highly born family. He's highborn in some way. He was not from a poor family of no influence. Otherwise, he would not have been taken. That's just a fact. They took the people that would be missed. Now you could say, well, that's not fair. Whatever. This isn't a conversation in what's fair and what's not. This is just a reality. Wipe out the influential, move them. And if you want to control influential people, what do? Hit their kids. You take their kids. They took them into bondage in Babylon. And you want to talk about a quick way to make sure people will do what they're supposed to do. Right? Imagine, Javi is the influential family here in Chula Vista. And they take his kids to, Reno, Nevada, and where the new empire is, okay? And how are you going to make sure that Javi is saying the things you want him to say? Hey, Javi, here's a letter from your son. He's doing fine, but make sure that you keep on script. Well, you just guaranteed the most influential person in Chula Vista is going to definitely say on script because he wants to make sure that his son is safe. It's kind of a famous, in recent history, there's a famous situation. It's kind of more known in Eastern Europe, and that's not known over here. So fun fact for if you're ever on Jeopardy, and this will never be asked, here you go. But when Hitler had taken over in Germany and he's kind of slowly moving or quickly moving around conquering places, Hungary tried to stay independent, and the leader at the time sent his son over to try and bring peace, and they executed him, killed him. And so then the Hungarian government knew we have no chance of peace with, like, we're never going to be independent. And so they ended up joining with him. But it was like a famous, like, send your son. That's kind of the message of the Bible, right? In the last days, God sent his son. And then what did they do to him? They crucified him. So when we get to the book of Daniel, chapter 1, Daniel, any guesses? Anybody want to take guesses how old Daniel is now at this point? He's a young dude. We don't know the exact. We always say kind of teenage years. It's very possible, mid-20s. The reason that we're pretty set on like him being really young is not as much because we can date it at that point. It's because of how long he lives later. So you start to date it based on, okay, did the dude make it to 100? And then you say, well, we don't know, maybe 90. So then if you do that, you date it backwards, and it would put him in about the mid to late teens when he was taken, maybe even early teens, when he was taken to Babylon. In the third year of the reign, I'm going to read a lot of Daniel. It's so short, so easy. In the third year of the reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came to Jerusalem, and he besieged it. And God gave the king into his hand. I'm going to jump around. The king instructed Ashpenaz, the master of his eunuchs, verse 3, to bring some of the children of Israel and some of the king descendants and some of the nobles, young men in whom there was no blemish, but good-looking, gifted in all wisdom, possessing knowledge, quick to understand, who had ability to serve in the king's palace, and whom they might teach the land and literature of the Chaldeans. And then the king appointed for them a daily provision of the king's delicacies and of the wine which he drank, and 3 years of training, so that at the end of that time they might serve before the king. And from among the sons of Judah were Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. To them the chief of the eunuchs gave names. He gave Daniel the name Belteshazzar, Hananiah, Shadrach, Mishael, Meshach, and to Azariah, Abednego. But, and maybe the most famous verse in the book of Daniel, Daniel purposed in his heart that he would not defile himself with the portion of the king's delicacies, nor with the wine which he drank. Therefore he requested of the chief of the eunuchs that he might not defile himself. And so this begins, the book of Daniel has no introduction. It's really quick. And we're brought right into, Daniel is living in the, kind of under the protection of Nebuchadnezzar. He's given 3 years of training with these other friends. By the way, the other friends, we only know them by their Babylonian names, don't we? Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. We know them better that way. Why don't we know Daniel as Belteshazzar? That's why you write a book, my friends. You get to keep your name. Daniel wrote the book. We know Daniel as Daniel. But the other guys, he was like, yeah, they're Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So always write your own story, okay? So Daniel is young. The king is grooming these young men in order to be counselors. Think about it. What better way, like this is what you would call the first, like at least recorded that I know of. I don't even think Egypt was a part of this. By the way, you could easily say, isn't the Egyptian army a part? But they were not really global dominators. Not nearly. They were irritants for centuries, but they didn't really ever rule quite like, you could say, well, what about like Pharaoh during the times of Moses? That's true, but it was very local to their area. So think of it like this. This is maybe arguably one of the very first experiments in what we would call, is recorded at least. This was multicultural, global, and even though I don't mean the whole world, but this was a multiracial empire. So what does he do? He gathers the young men, the noble sons from all these different groups that they've conquered, trains them in his ways. This we call acculturation or assimilation. You're going to become more like us, but you're going to know what it was like back in your homeland, and you're going to tell me how to rule and govern those people. Think about in the New Testament when Pilate tried to rule the Jews. He did such a terrible job, mainly because he never listened to any Jew on how to govern. He just did what Rome would do, never listened to anybody. So Nebuchadnezzar seems to be gathering a group of people around him who he's still supreme, but hey, what do your people think about this? What are your people? So it sounds like some kind of a hodgepodge, and he's going to train them in his ways. But Daniel, we read, purposed in his heart that he would not defile himself with the portion of the king's delicacies, nor with the wine which he drank. So a couple points that I'd like to make about this idea. First, Daniel's decision was not because the food, the wine, the drink, the whatever was wrong, evil, or bad. It wasn't a decision. It was not a moral decision. And what I mean, that's not true. It's partly moral, but not fully. He was not doing this because it was like, I will never eat that food that they give to me. I'm better than that, or I'm different than that. Jews drank wine and ate a lot of the same foods. Maybe not the unkosher foods, but a lot of the same foods. This was not some moral position on, oh, his stuff is wrong, my stuff is good. It was a moral decision to say, I want to be pure. I want to I don't want to eat these things. I don't want to do this. I want to focus myself on I'm going to walk with God and I'm not going to get distracted by all this other stuff. They're trying to woo us with hey, try this, eat this, drink this, have this, love this, be a part of this. You could be this, you could be yada, yada. No, I'm going to stay focused. I'm going to purpose in my heart not to defile myself. I'm going to stay focused on the Lord. Does that make sense? So it's maybe, I grew up, or when I got saved, I was a youth pastor at Calvary, Costa Mesa. Every year that we would have a youth camp, Chuck would usually teach this passage. And, such a great passage for young people. But it really is a great passage for all of us. What does it look like to say, I'm going to purpose in my heart not to defile myself? That's why, now again, Rick Warren turned this into a diet. I like Rick Warren a lot. I'm a big, but that's not what it originally was. This was not Daniel feeling like he had put on a few extra kilos in Babylon, and he was looking at how he could work that off, and there's nothing better than a vegetarian diet. That's not what's happening. This was I need to be ready, body, soul, and spirit. I need to prepare myself, body, soul, and spirit. And I would even suggest to you that it's a really great, there's a wisdom principle that even though I would say Daniel's not Christian, right? Daniel was Jewish. But the life of faith considers every part of who you are as important to offer to God. I've experienced... How many of you are gym people? Anybody like going to the gym? Or let me start with this. How many of you just go to the gym? And then take away the like. You just do it. You hate it. And okay. How many of you like the gym? Okay. No, there's something wrong with all. Okay. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, right. There's some people there, and we all know these people. The body is the thing. The body is the main thing, right? But that doesn't mean they don't care about their mind or their soul or whatever. Let me take it like this. There's a trend for a lot of Christians that we kind of neglect other parts of who we are, but we could quote a Bible verse, but we don't know how to learn how to communicate with people, or we haven't grown to to process, or we just oh, nothing else matters. I only need this. I see the opposite also happening today. I see so few Christians who know their Bibles. So few Christians know, and I'm not looking at you when I said, I was looking right at you. I'm talking to you. Okay. I'm not thinking of you, but I'll challenge every single one of us. We have one book that we are completely committed to. One. That's it. You will never be required to have to invest your life into any other, you read more books when you were in school than you'll ever have to as a Christian. If you and I would, so I do believe in I see a lot of Christians now, it's kind of trendy to be no, we just need to grow emotionally, we need to grow in all these things. That's all great. I believe in that, totally. But you should also grow in the Word of God. And guess what? You should also include dieting a little bit and exercising a little bit. Why am I wasn't looking at any of you. I'm going to put my head down. I'm judging everyone. No, why am I saying that? I'm not saying oh, we all need to lose weight or we need, no. That our body, mind, soul, and spirit are going to be disciplined for the purposes of God. Jesus never said fast because you need to lose weight. He said fast because you're a slave to your own appetite. That's the reality. It's not about pounds, sorry. It's all about discipline. It's about so Daniel, and now I want you to think about this. Try to remember yourself at 15 years old. What did discipline look like for you? And yet here's Daniel with no family, no support system, nobody, and that works both ways. That would be extreme homesickness, but also like, I can be whoever I want. And yet Daniel, it says, he purposed in his heart that he would not defile himself. That's insane. I don't know many adults who have this kind of integrity and discipline. That's who we are to understand Daniel is right from the get-go. How does anyone, this is the beginning of the book. This is verse 8. I want you to consider this. If we were asked to run the 100-meter race in the Olympics tomorrow, we could finish the race. But it would not be pretty if there were Olympians present. Right? Or let's make it worse, because we could all run, but let's just, we're all going to jump in the pool and do, 10 laps back and forth. I'm going to drown. Or it's just going to be slow and ugly, right? But now, if you said, hey, in 6 months, you're gonna do this. Okay, so then what are you going to do? Well, and so you're going to try to put a little bit of discipline into that, right? So Daniel is, let me use a war analogy here. You don't airdrop people into behind the front lines with no discipline, right? With no training you don't just say hey, it's week 1, let's just get it. You got this. No, there's training, discipline, hard work, preparation. I want you to wonder about this for a minute. Who was Daniel already? Not just what he says and what he does here, but who was he already? And so I'm always I think as we get older, we tend to look back and be we either have these little bits of I wish I would have done this, or I could have done this, or whatever. I just think it's a complete unnecessary. I think just look at where you're at right now and say, I'm going to move forward and I'm going to do better in the Lord. I'm all for let's learn and grow from who we were. I could do better. The Lord shows you I need to apologize to that person. Go apologize. I'm not saying we don't look back, but when you look back and it's all it focuses you on regret, that's not helping you for your future. That's paralyzing you in your past. So I think I always heard Chuck say to young people, now's the time, purpose in your heart. I think every day is the day to make that decision to say I'm going to purpose now. I'm going to and I think it's easier, I think we can all speak on this. It's easier to discipline yourself when you're 15. I still run. I don't run fast, I don't run pretty, but I still run. And I usually run at 4:30 when all the either OTI or Olympian kids are all running. And it's just rude how they pass me, and it's just mean, and I even yelled at them. I'm this is elder abuse, and they were laughing, and I was standing at the light with some of the kids, and I'm how far are you guys running? And they're it's only 5 miles. I'm I hate all of you, What about you? I'm well, I'm going to get 4, but it's an ugly 4. And they're at least you're still doing do not finish the sentence. Do not finish that sentence if you cherish your life. So I think it's easier to discipline yourself at that age because you can just bounce up and, okay, you want me to go do this? Cool, I'll go do this. I think the longer we live, the harder it is for discipline. And I'm not talking physical anymore, by the way. Spiritual discipline, mental discipline. We're so set in our ways that we've actually, I use the phrase calcifying. I think it's important that we still freak our systems out, body, soul, and spirit, and say, a man will not live by what? But by every word, what? That proceeds from the mouth of God. I will not be controlled by anything but the word of God. So, Daniel purposes in art. Make sense so far? Capiche? Okay, let's continue. Now, God brought Daniel into the favor and goodwill of the chief of eunuchs. And the chief said, I fear my lord the king who has appointed your food and drink, for why would he see your faces look worse than the young men who are your age? And Daniel, verse 11, said to the steward whom the chief of the eunuchs had set over them all, test your servants for 10 days, and let them give us vegetables to eat, water to drink, and let our appearance be examined, and the appearance of the young men. So he consented with them, and he tested them for 10 days, verse 15. At the end of the 10 days, their features appeared better and fatter in flesh than all the young men who ate and the portion of the king's delicacies. I'm just setting this up here. And so the steward took away their portion of delicacies, verse 16, and the wine that they were to drink, and he gave them vegetables. As for these 4 young men, God gave them knowledge and skill in all literature and wisdom. Daniel had understanding in all things. And at the end of the days, verse 18, when the king had said that they should be brought in, the king interviewed them, and among all of them, none was found like Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. And in all the matters of wisdom and understanding, verse 20, which the king examined, he found them 10 times better than all the magicians and astrologers who were in all his realm. And Daniel continued until the first year of King Cyrus. That's the extent. King Cyrus is decades down the road. Arguably, Daniel is one of the longest reigning rulers. Now, he was not the main ruler, but one of the, he lived through more. It's not like a presidency where it's like a democracy where we people that are they roll over from one presidency to the next. They're in a role where it's like, no, you just keep going, you just keep going. He's in a role where kings were like, I don't trust any of you, and you just get rid of them all, which meant death. So this is chapter 1. Chapter 2, in the second year of Nebuchadnezzar's reign, Nebuchadnezzar had dreams, and his spirit was so troubled that his sleep left him. And the king gave command to call the magicians, astrologers, sorcerers, Chaldeans, to tell the king his dreams. So they came, and he said, I had a dream, and my spirit is anxious to know it. And the Chaldeans spoke to the king in Aramaic, means this book was probably written in Aramaic. O king, live forever. Tell your servants the dream, and we will give the interpretation. And the king said to them, my decision is firm. If you do not make known the dream and its interpretation, you'll be cut in pieces, and your houses will be in an ash heap. Tell us how you really feel, Nebuchadnezzar. However, if you tell the dream and its interpretation, you will receive gifts from me, reward, and great honor. Therefore, tell me the dream and its interpretation. And they answered and they said, let the king tell the servants the dream, and we will give interpretation. And the king said, I know that you would gain time, because you see that my decision is firm. If you do not make the dream known to me, there is only one decree for you. This is like the tale, off with their heads, off with their heads. This is the off with their heads. For you have agreed to speak lying and corrupt words. Therefore, tell me the dream, and I will know that you can give its interpretation. And the Chaldeans answered, there is not a man on earth who can tell the king's matter. Therefore, no king, lord, or ruler has ever asked such a thing. It's a difficult thing that you're asking. Verse 12, for this reason the king was angry and furious, and he gave the command to destroy all the wise men of Babylon. The decree went out, and they began killing the wise men, and they sought Daniel and his companions to kill them. Just a quick pause. We don't need to take a long time, but just a quick pause. What's happening here is this is like what we would call power struggle. Most likely, Nebuchadnezzar is very early in a reign. Most likely he's inherited these people, and these people are looking at how they can control him, and he's wanting to set a clear path. I am going to control you. So this is what we would call a very clear, there's a power dynamic happening here. Power struggle, big time. Big time power struggle. And so he sets a standard that was impossible. And it was his way of saying, hey, listen, this is what I expect, and if you can't do it, you're all dead. Now he gets to clear the deck, and he gets to start over. Right? And it's a great way to find out if anybody's actually, let's put it like this. Nebuchadnezzar didn't believe in this astrology stuff. Obviously, he didn't believe in it in some way, shape, or form. And so he's like, well, you tell me the dream and all that. So now, they're now going around and they begin to kill the wise men. When you read wise men, I want you to remember, tell me another time when you hear wise men in the New Testament. Coming to meet Jesus, right? So have that in your picture. That most likely, very, very probable, the wise men of the New Testament came from the same region that Daniel is now living in Babylon. And that they are a part of that same grouping of people that were a part of this like kind of mystical, read the stars kind of people. And many believe that they even are like that Daniel's like a founder of that. Now, he was not a star reader, but he did have divine knowledge, didn't he? And it's very probable that in his own prophetic writing that he's passing this down. Hey, you're a part of this order of wise men, and I'm telling you, one day when you see these stars, go there because the Messiah has been born. It is not only probable, it makes perfect sense. So, when you hear that, think wise men. They're killing wise men. Verse 14. Then with counsel and wisdom, Daniel answered Arioch, the captain of the king's guard. He answered, and he says, verse 15, why is a decree from the king so urgent? And Arioch let the decision be known. Daniel went and asked the king to give him time that he might tell the king the interpretation. Pretty amazing, isn't it? Teenager goes in there, he's like, hey, just give me some time. I'll give you the interpretation. Just give me some time. Then Daniel, this is one of my favorite things that in the Bible. Honestly, this is one of my favorite. You ready? So just again, verse 16. Daniel went and asked the king to give him time. Verse 17. Daniel went to his house and he let the decision be known to Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah that they might seek mercy from the God of heaven concerning the secret, so that Daniel and his companions might not perish with the rest of the wise men of Babylon. I just want you to realize something. When Daniel went to the king and he said, hey, give me some time and we'll get you that dream. He goes back to his room and he goes, dudes, we need a prayer meeting immediately. This is an immediate. Do not stop at go. Do not collect your money. Get in here immediately. Why? I would suggest to you this is a great example of what the New Testament calls the gift of faith. Daniel had faith that God would do something and a gift of faith means you don't know what it's going to look like. You have no way of knowing. The Bible says that God gifts people with faith. Not faith to believe, but even more than that. Everybody has a measure of faith to believe. Even the most skeptical person is like, oh, I can't believe in that stuff. Everybody has the seed of faith to believe. Not everybody has this kind of faith. But God just put this into Daniel. He goes back to his friends and he's like, we need to pray. What happened? I just talked to the king. What's going to happen? Well, we're going to die. Unless God. And that's it. Unless God. And can I just also remind you, even if you don't have the gift of faith, living by faith requires that you believe God more than you believe man. You believe God more than you believe man. You put more confidence in God than you do in... And some of us can say, oh yeah, that's definitely how I feel. The proof's in when people disappoint you and all those things happen. So it's one of my favorites. And then verse 19, the secret was revealed to Daniel in a night vision. So I want you to imagine, they went and prayed, the whole prayer meeting, nothing. I don't know what time you stop praying. I don't know how you do that. You're like, I'm too tired, man. We're going to have to sleep on this now. Okay, we'll go to bed, and then in the night, God gives Daniel a vision. So Daniel blessed the God of heaven. And Daniel answered, and he said, blessed be the name of God forever and ever, for wisdom and might are his. He changes the times and the seasons. He removes and raises up kings. He gives wisdom to the wise and knowledge to those who have understanding. He reveals deep and secret things. He knows what's in the darkness, and light dwells with him. I thank you and praise you, O God of my fathers. So, Daniel, verse 24, goes to Arioch. And he went in and he says, do not destroy the wise men of Babylon. Take me before the king, and I will tell the king the interpretation. And he quickly brought Daniel before the king, and he said, I found a man. This dude came to you. What are you talking about? Anyways, everybody was self-promoting a bit. I found a man of the captives of Judah who will make known to the king the interpretation. The king answered and said to Daniel, whose name was Belteshazzar, are you able to make known the dream and its interpretation? Daniel answered in the presence of the king, the secret that the king demands, which the king, with the wise men, the astrologers, magicians, soothsayers cannot declare, there is a God in heaven who reveals secrets. And that's a powerful testimony, isn't it? I think there's and this has always been true. It's not just true now, but it's always true. There is a mindset that we need to really watch out for. And there's a mindset that says, if I'm doing good, then I'll really honor God better. I'll really glorify God best if I'm doing good. And history and then the Word of God tells us that's not necessarily true. Sometimes David's worst moments were when he was doing well. He was doing so good, he didn't feel any pressure. He was doing so good, he was checking out Bathsheba. He was doing so good, he didn't go into battle. His greatest moments were when there was deep, deep pressure upon his life. The reason I say that, and I say this, is because there is a mindset that's like, if I were this or if I were that, then I could really, but the risk is that if that's what's happening, and you believe that's what it's going to take to glorify God, what's really going to happen is you're just going to glorify yourself. But what does it look like when Daniel had every opportunity to be like, yeah, I have the interpretation. I have it. But instead he's like, I need to make this very clear that there is a God in heaven who gives interpretations. I'm not even going to claim this for myself. It's not just an act of it's easy to be like, oh, he was so humble. It's deeper than humility. Humility in the Bible is never a characteristic that is like, oh, wow, they're so, it's like, this is what, humble yourself. Where does the Bible say to humble yourself? And where? That's the only thing anybody has ever done in the Bible when they're in the presence of God. Even when John was in the presence of an angel, he started to worship the angel. It's not like you have an option. It's not like you could stand before God and choose arrogance. There's no place for arrogance before the presence of God. So the problem is that when I choose self-promotion over authenticity and honoring God, when I choose self-promotion, you can know one thing right away. I'm not in the presence of God. Because to be in the presence of God is a humble position. Does that make sense? So Daniel is not just he's not just I don't want to take credit. No, he's saying I stand before God. The only way you could ever stand before a king and speak with such clarity, Daniel is not bold. He's not yelling. He's not angry. He's not I have a message from God. This is not a Ben-Hur kind of a moment or a Moses kind of a moment. This is a really just a quiet, soft moment of there's a God who has interpretation and dreams. He has this. And I think that's really a critical element of the Christian life too, So he tells him the dream. I'll be quick about it. He's going to read it. He's going to say it several different times, several different ways. We'll just do it once. As for you, O king, your thoughts came, verse 29, came to your mind while you were on your bed about what to come to pass. And he who reveals secrets has made known to you what will be. For as for me, the secret has not been revealed because I have more wisdom than anyone living, but for our sakes who make known the interpretation of the king, that you might know the thoughts of your heart. So I'd like to live and you want peace of mind. You want peace of mind, I want to live, so God is faithful. I love that. You, O king, were watching. And a great image, this great image whose splendor was excellent, stood before you. Its form was awesome. The image head was of fine gold, its chest and arms of silver, its belly of thighs of bronze, its legs of iron, its feet partly of iron and partly of clay. You watched while a stone cut out without hands, which struck the image on its feet of iron and clay. It broke them in pieces, and the iron, the clay, the bronze, the silver, and the gold were crushed. Became like chaff from the summer threshing floors. The wind carried them away so that no trace of them was found. And the stone that struck the image became a great mountain and filled the whole earth. This is the dream. Now let me tell you the interpretation. Dude, I'll bet you Nebuchadnezzar was losing his mind. Losing his mind. You, O king, are a king of kings, for the God of heaven has given you a kingdom, a power, strength, and glory. Verse 38, wherever the children of men dwell, or the beasts of the field and the birds of the heaven. He's given them into your hand. He's made you ruler of all. You are the head of gold. But after you will rise another kingdom, inferior to yours, then another, a third kingdom of bronze, which shall rule over the earth, and then a fourth kingdom, which will be as strong as iron, inasmuch as iron breaks in pieces and shatters everything, and like iron that crushes, that kingdom will break in pieces and crush all the others. Whereas you saw the feet and toes, partly of potter's clay, partly of iron, the kingdom will be divided, yet the strength of the iron will be in it. Just as you saw the iron mixed with ceramic clay, and as the toes of the feet were partly of iron and partly of clay, so the kingdom will be partly strong and partly fragile. As you saw iron mixed with ceramic clay, they will mingle with the seed of men, but they will not adhere to one another. just as iron does not mix with clay. And in the days of these kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom which will never be destroyed, and the kingdom shall not be left to other people. It'll break in pieces and consume all these kingdoms, and it'll stand forever. Inasmuch as you saw that the stone was cut out of the mountain without hands, and it broke in pieces the iron, the bronze, the clay, the silver, and the gold, the great God has made known to the king what will come to pass after this. The dream is certain, and its interpretation is sure. Hold that dream, hold that interpretation for just a moment. Let's finish the narrative. Nebuchadnezzar fell on his face, prostrate before Daniel. Can you imagine this? Holy mama, this is insane. He commanded that they bring an offering and incense. And the king answered Daniel, truly your God is the God of gods, the Lord of kings, and the revealer of secrets. Isn't this how you want people to think of our God? And the king promoted Daniel and gave him many great gifts, made him rule over the whole province of Babylon and the chief administrator over all the wise men of Babylon. And Daniel petitioned the king, and he set Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego over the affairs of the province of Babylon. But Daniel sat in the gate of the king. That means, if you've ever read that phrase, like he sat in the gate, that means a judge, like a ruler in the community or in the city or in the town or whatnot. He sat in the gate. He sat in the gate makes him like an elder. So when it says that he sat in the gate of the king, that meant like, I am the king's guy. Daniel became, in the interpretation of one dream he did not have that God was faithful to give. Daniel just had the boldness and faith to trust God. In that one moment, Daniel went from he was on death row to now becoming the second most powerful person in the kingdom. Real quick. Now, the rest of the book of Daniel is a story of how quick that can go away too. That you rise and you fall, and it doesn't take, you don't have to do anything wrong to go up to the top. And let me tell you this, you don't even have to do something right to go to the top sometimes. But in Daniel's case, he did nothing wrong, and he was brought to the top. And he did nothing wrong, and he was brought back down. Daniel was in the gate of the king. Decades later, he was in a lion's den. Same person, same principle, same character. The book of Daniel is a clear reminder. You don't have to like this, and I don't either, but it's a reality. Doing good in the name of Jesus Christ is no guarantee that you will experience good. That's just a reality. Now, I've already told you this on Sundays especially. I think it's a false thing to make ourselves martyrs when we're not martyrs. You know, like, oh, we're on the outside. Dudes, we're fine. We're going to keep, it's Wednesday night and we're preaching the gospel. Like, we get to do whatever we want and go home and turn on your Christian radio station that is federally allowed all over. You know what I mean? I'm just saying, like, let's keep our perspectives here. Daniel went from number 2 to kind of on the outside, to forgotten, to a lion's den. Back to the top. He's just like jumping all over the place. And in all of that, you know what? He was just like Job. He's going to say this, blessed be the name of the Lord. If you stand before God, nobody else is going to make nearly as big of an impact. And I don't mean to say like you don't care, like, oh, if I see a celebrity, they don't matter to me. That's not my point. What I'm saying is, once you and I stand before God, we realize we're all just people. And Nebuchadnezzar was just another person who had a bad dream, who needed some support. And in the process of God opening Nebuchadnezzar's eyes, the whole world is changed. Quite literally, the whole world has changed. Okay. So the dream. This will be quick. Because, man, I ran out of time. Dang it. The next few chapters are going to move pretty fast, so you ready? Daniel has a dream. It's a dream of a statue, right? Head of what? Gold. Next piece is the next kind of body part was what? Silver. Next was bronze. Next was iron. Next was clay and iron, right? These are the kingdoms that I just mentioned to you earlier. Jump to chapter 3, excuse me. Nebuchadnezzar the king made an image of gold. He made a whole image of gold. What did Daniel tell Nebuchadnezzar he was? Which part of the statue was Nebuchadnezzar? The head of you, O king, are the head of gold. But after he's going to come another kingdom and then another and another. And so what does Nebuchadnezzar do? Let's go ahead and make a whole statue of gold. He had experienced the power of God in this interpretation, no doubt been influenced by Daniel. Some years pass, and all of a sudden he's like, you know what? I don't like that I'm not going to last forever. I don't like that my kingdom's going to end, so I am going to make a statue of all gold. It was a clear defiance to the word of God. Not only does he make a statue of gold, but then his lackeys and his whole crowd of kind of wannabes are like, let's make it that everybody's got to bow down to the statue, right? And so then everybody has to bow down. Play the fiddle, and there was not a fiddle, but anyways, they play the music, and everybody's got to bow down. And everybody does that except for 3 guys. And who are the 3 guys? Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Like I told you, if you want your Hebrew name, write your own book. Otherwise, your Babylonian name is what we're going to get. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Big question that always comes up. Where in the world is Daniel? Because in no circumstance can you imagine Daniel would have bowed down. So he's obviously... So what's happening? What do you think is happening? Do you think Nebuchadnezzar gave him a pass? I don't think so. I think there's a really, really simple answer. What do you think it is? He ain't there. It wasn't CNN, Fox News, whatever. They had no global. He's somewhere else in the empire. Nebuchadnezzar's, it wasn't like you could get anywhere quick. So it's months, and you're gone months and months and months. Arguably, sometimes maybe years. And Nebuchadnezzar does this whole thing, so it just leaves Shadrach, Meshach. So don't imagine and if you read, you'll read these weird this might have happened. The simplest answer is usually the best answer, and that is, he's just not around. And so Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego say, we will not bow down. Well, Nebuchadnezzar is the one that put them in power, but now he's upset that they're challenging his power. And so, of course, the story, verse 14, is it true, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, you do not serve my gods or worship the gold image which I set up? When the music plays, my interpretation, you better dance. Verse 16, these 3 men said, O Nebuchadnezzar, we have no need to answer you in this matter. If that is the case, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace. And he will deliver us from your hand, O king. But if not, let it be known to you, O king, that we do not serve your gods, nor will we worship the gold image which you have set up. I want to mention a couple things. The first thing I want to mention is back to the point that I made. Isn't it interesting that when Israel was doing good, life was good, they were not doing well? As soon as life got good, their faith in God was in decline. So if you're ever trying to understand, why would God let these things happen to me? There's another way to rephrase that. It might not be why is God letting this happen to me? But how is this? Is it possible that God is using all things to ensure that I have moments where I'm required to need him? Because if left to myself, I will not need God. I will not need God. Some of the saddest people I've ever experience I've seen is when I've seen people who are in ministry as a profession full time who are just, it's a coasting and you stop needing God. You know what to do, it's a job, you just do the job. They're miserable because they're made for something different. And that's true for all of our lives. So it's a good lesson here that when you read the book of Daniel, you're like, dude, chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, their lives were always on the line, and then this awesome thing happened, and God broke through, and it was this beautiful thing. But also, none of us want to be these dudes. I want to be them on the victory. I don't want to be them in the challenge. One of my best friends in the world in Hungary, him and his wife, and Joy and I were very, very, very close. He was married. His wife passed away. His first wife passed away. She was pregnant. They'd been married 6 months, I think, or something like that. Maybe a year and a half. And she passed away, And then over the next couple of years, the Lord was just doing something beautiful in his life, and just this really powerful thing. And we'd sit down, and he'd be sharing, "Oh, God's been speaking this to me and this to me." I'm like, "Dude, I love all the things God's speaking to you. I just don't want to. Can I just learn them from you, por favor? I don't want to go through I know that everything you're telling me came at a very heavy price." And that's a hard reality to all of our lives. That's just a hard reality. We all want to be Daniel when he was second in the throne. And we want to be Daniel when the lions aren't eating him. I don't want to be Daniel when I'm going into that lion's den. I'd love to be there as soon as I find out God ain't going to let me get hurt. I'd love to be in the fire knowing the fire ain't going to burn me, but I am averse to pain. I would rather not, like, you see what I'm getting at? Like, I love the victories, but it's a heavy price. So, I love what they say here. I really need you to hear this. This is so cool. Our God that we serve is able to deliver us. Faith. But, here's the caveat. If we burn up, we still won't worship because we're trusting God. So, we are not going to blame God if we die today. We're going to love him no matter what. Be it known, we may be rescued, we may not. But either way, we're going to trust in the Lord. Don't you want to be that kind of person? Oh, that's so cool. I want to be that kind of person. So Nebuchadnezzar, though, was not, having to be the one to say it, not easy. Nebuchadnezzar, full of fury, and the expression on his face changed toward Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. He spoke and commanded that they turn the heat up 7 times. And he commanded that certain mighty men of valor who were in his army bind Shadrach, Meshach, and cast them into the burning fiery furnace. And these men were bound in their coats, trousers, turbans, and other garments. And because the king's command was urgent and the furnace was very hot, the flame of the fire killed the men who were throwing in Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Yeah. And these 3 men fell down, bound into the midst of the burning fiery furnace. And Nebuchadnezzar was astonished. And he rose in haste, and he spoke, and he said to his counselors, "Did we not cast 3 into the fire?" They answered and said, "True, O king. Look, I see 4 men loose, walking in the midst of fire. They are not hurt, and the form of the 4th is like the Son of God." This is arguably the coolest thing you'll ever read in your life. It's the coolest moment. It's like one of the, this is like exactly like when the waters part and they walk through the river. When Lazarus comes out walking like a mummy. This is like that one of those moments. This is unreal. Please notice with me what is happening here. They're thrown into the fire. Now, the other dudes threw them into the fire and burned up. What is the only thing that was burned up on these dudes was the things that were binding them. The most free place you and I will ever be will be in the presence of God. The most free you will ever be in your life will not be if you get the promotion, marry the girl, marry the guy, find the right environment, get the right this. The freest you will ever be in your life will be in the presence of God. Now, I want to also break this to you. It may come with some heat. It might come with some real heat. But that is the message of Daniel 3 here. There's no, you trust God, you will be more free than you will ever be in your entire life. And God will be present. But it usually won't come except for when, when did Peter get rescued by God from an angel? It was when he was in dark and the angel came and rescued him out of a prison. We have a friend, not a close friend, more of an acquaintance now, but a friend who had been imprisoned in Iraq and was eventually rescued by the U.S. military. Her name is Heather Mercer. Some of you have, she's a fascinating, amazing person. And she was with us in Budapest and sharing at the church and telling the story. And she's like, it's pretty awesome to have the U.S. military come and rescue you. It's a pretty amazing thing, She said, but I should tell you that my interpreter was also arrested. And nobody cares about him. The U.S. government's not coming to his rescue. But he told the story of how an angel rescued him out of prison. Quite literally, it said, after she got home, a month later, she gets a phone call she knew it was where it was from. Hello? And he's like, I got out. How did you get out? God showed up. An angel showed up and said, I'm here to rescue you. He said, I walked right through prison. Doors opened, walked straight through. Nobody stopped me. Nobody said a word. Now, again, if you're like me and somebody tells me, oh, I have this story, my first thing is, I don't believe you. I'm that guy, just so you know. Until you hear it from someone that you know is just like you and who has their own, I think doubt is a healthy thing. Jesus never got mad at Thomas for doubting. He just said, you're going to see things that you won't even believe. So my point is like, she would tell her story of like, it's something else to get rescued by your country. But dang, this dude got rescued by God. And so you have to understand, like, your greatest freedom is going to come when you're fully in the presence of God. Your greatest freedom. Nebuchadnezzar, I mean, dude, how many times do you need things like this to happen before you? But he, once again, verse 26, he's like, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, come out of there. And they came out. And they saw these men on whose bodies the fire had no power. Not any of their hair was singed. When's the last time you went to a bonfire and came home and didn't smell of smoke? But they didn't smell of smoke. And he said, blessed be the God of these men who sent his angel and delivered his servants who trusted in him. They frustrated the king's words. They yielded their bodies that they would not serve or worship any god except their God. So I made a decree that any people, nation, or language which speaks against the God of these men will be cut in pieces and their houses will be made an ash heap. This guy loves to cut people in pieces and make their houses into ash heaps. Because there is no other God who can deliver like, don't you love it? His idea of expressing his love for God is, if you don't love God like me, I will cut you into pieces and make your house an ash heap. And I think, I'm imagining Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were like, we love your excitement, but you could tone that down a little bit. But he's the king, you're going to let it go. So he was really into hacking and ash heaps. He loved this stuff. But it was his way of saying, I'm all in. By the way, when he says they frustrated the words of the king, he's talking about himself. So fascinating. Chapter 4, this won't take too long. Another dream. Another dream. This time he's like, okay, I'll tell you guys the dream and I need you to give me the interpretation. He calls Belteshazzar, Daniel. I know, verse 9, the Spirit of the Holy God is in you. No secret troubles you. Explain this vision to me. These are the visions that I had, and he explains the visions. And in this vision, he's seeing what's about to happen to him. That because he has boasted himself above the God of heaven, he is going to be brought down. Verse 15, leave the stump roots of the earth, bound with a band of iron and bronze in the tender grass of the field. Let it be wet with the dew of heaven. Let him graze with the beasts on the grass of the earth. Let his heart be changed from that of a man. Let him be given the heart of a beast, and let 7 times pass over him. This dream, verse 18, I, Nebuchadnezzar, have seen. Now you, Belteshazzar, declare it to me. So Daniel, verse 19, spoke to the king, Belteshazzar, do not let the dream of its interpretation trouble you. My Lord, may the dream concern those who hate you and its interpretation concern your enemies. The tree you saw and all those things whose leaves were lovely and its fruit were all these things. Verse 22, it is you, O king. You have grown and become strong. Verse 23, inasmuch as the king saw a watcher, a holy one, coming down from heaven and saying, chop down the tree, but leave its stump, let it be wet. This is the interpretation. Verse 24, this is the decree of the Most High. Verse 25, they will drive you from men. Your dwelling will be with beasts of the field. They will make you eat grass like oxen. They will wet you with the dew of heaven, and 7 times you will pass over you. Like, in other words, like maybe 7 years. Till you know that the Most High rules in the kingdom of men and gives it to whomever he chooses. Therefore, O king, let my advice be, verse 27, acceptable. Break off your sin by being righteous, and your iniquity by showing mercy to the poor. Perhaps there may be a lengthening of your prosperity. And then all this came upon Nebuchadnezzar. At the end of the 12 months, he was walking around the royal palace of Babylon, and the king spoke, saying, isn't this great Babylon that I have built? And while the word was still in his mouth, a voice from heaven said, King Nebuchadnezzar, to you it is spoken. The kingdom has departed from you, and they will drive you from men, and basically reiterates the verses that had been said in the dream. Verse 33, that very hour, the prophecy was fulfilled. He was driven from men and ate grass like an ox. His body was wet with the dew of heaven, till his hair had grown like eagle's feathers and his nails like bird's claws. I need you to try to imagine, this is not like a ancient mythical story of like he became an animal like an ox. But it definitely sounds like for all the therapists in the room, this dude lost his mind, his ever-loving mind. and quite literally became animalistic. Think of the demoniac who came running up to Jesus. Think the same thing. He had superpower strength. Obviously, Nebuchadnezzar lost his mind. I'm not saying that he wasn't like, it sounds like he just went crazy, like absolute nuts, and became like animalistic. And apparently this would go on for 7 years. Imagine that, 7 years. At the end of the time, verse 34, I, Nebuchadnezzar, lifted my eyes to heaven, and my understanding returned, and I blessed the Most High God, and praised and honored him who lives forever. For his dominion is an everlasting dominion. His kingdom is from generation. This is Nebuchadnezzar writing this. He probably said, hey, Daniel, write this down. Verse 36, at the same time my reason returned to me, and for the glory of my kingdom, my honor and splendor returned. My counselors and nobles resorted to me, and I was restored to my kingdom. And I, Nebuchadnezzar, praise and extol and honor the King of heaven, all those whose works are true, and his ways are justice, and those who walk in pride he is able to put down. This is arguably why we believe there's a very good reason Nebuchadnezzar's in heaven. I'm going to be quick we'll cover this a little bit more next week. But just for the narrative's sake, this takes us into a couple kings later now. Nebuchadnezzar is gone, Daniel's still kicking around. Belshazzar, the king, made a great feast. And this is at the very end of the Babylonian Empire. So now I need you to think, we're now at the end of 70 years, when God's about to restore Israel to their own land. And Belshazzar has this incredible, throws this big party. He brings out all the gold vessels that were from the temple. Bring those things out. Those things are awesome. Let's all get drunk in those things. And in that same hour, they saw a man's hand writing on the wall. And the king is drunk, but he was not so drunk he couldn't freak out. He freaks out. Somebody needs to interpret this. The king's mom knew about Daniel. So now Daniel was at the very top in chapter 4, and it sounds like he's kind of like in retirement in chapter 5. He's not around. But the king's mother, the queen, she's like, queen mother, I remember there was this guy, he was an interpreter of dreams. So they bring Daniel out. Are you the Daniel who, can interpret these things? I'll give you a third of my kingdom. And it's kind of a joke. Daniel's like, I had half the kingdom before. My arithmetic is getting worse. Now you're taking it away. It used to be more. And he says, keep your gifts, verse 17. I don't need any of that. But I need you to know this. Your heart has been lifted up high. Your arrogance has been seen. You have not humbled your heart, verse 22. The writing on the wall says this, verse 25. Mene, mene, we don't know. Mene, tekel, upharsin. Which means God has numbered your kingdom and finished it. You've been weighed in the balances and you are lacking. Your kingdom has been divided and it's given to the Medes and the Persians. Then Belshazzar gave the command and they clothed Daniel with... This is what's weird. Oh, thank you for the interpretation. He just told you you're done. This is the height of foolishness. When God is saying you're finished and you're like, robe this guy, clothe this guy, make this guy everything, yada, yada, yada. And that very night, the king of the Chaldeans was slain and Darius the Mede took over the kingdom. Just like that. It's the rise and it's the fall. It's the rise and it's the fall. It's the rise and it's the fall. And now he is Medo-Persian. It's the Medo-Persian Empire in chapter 6. This is the easiest one. Nobody can pray except to our gods. Darius is full of pride and he signs it. It's the repeat of chapter 3. This time it's not fire, it's lions. This time it's not Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Those dudes are probably dead now. It's Daniel. Daniel's old and Daniel's doing what Daniel's been doing for decades. He's seeking God. He's praying to God. He's seeking God and look at this guy, he's praying to... Here's an old dude praying to God and you're worried about him. Okay. Daniel, is this true? Yep, it's true. I'm going to have to throw you to the lions. Okay. Rise, fall. And they lower him down into the lion's den. Bible tells us that Darius is up all night, stressed, worried. Verse 18, the king came early in the morning because his sleep had left him in verse 18, yeah. 19, he rose early, came to the den, he cried out, lamenting voice to Daniel, Daniel, servant of the living God, is your God whom you serve continually been able to deliver you from the lion's den? Daniel said to the king, O king, live forever. My God sent his angel and shut the lions' mouths. I just want to make clear, like, the pictures make it seem like these were really, like, nice lions. And I think what Daniel says here is really important. An angel came in and shut their mouths. They would have loved to eat me. This wasn't one of those like precious moments, kind of like a lion and the lamb kind of a moment, you know. This was like violence met by greater force. That's the story of the kingdom of God. The kingdom of God is a greater force than the violence of men. Remember I told you guys in the book of Revelation, it all ends violently one way or the other. It's either violence brought upon by the wrath of God, or it's violence brought on that was poured out on his son Jesus. It's all violence in the end. So it's ironic that Daniel slept with lions nearby and Darius could not sleep in a king's palace. Isn't that irony of all ironies? At any rate, Darius honors, he brings him out, your God is the God of all the gods. And Daniel's like, I heard this so many times. So many times, you know. And that is, you know, and again, how could you not talk more about the story of Daniel 6? Because we all have heard this story so many times. The principles are what really matters. And that is, again, violence was met by a stronger force. Daniel was not going to compromise. He didn't compromise at 15. He sure as heck wasn't going to compromise at 75. I'm going to argue with you, not argue with you. I'm going to argue, listen, I'm seriously going to argue this point, that it was easier for Daniel to do that at 15 than it was at 75. Unless you build discipline into your life every single day. That's it. It's simple. It's like this, and this is like a basic like leadership principle. It's a biblical one, but it's talked about all the time. If you are 20, the actions today will dictate who you are at 40. And the actions at 40 will dictate 60. And the action, do you see what I'm saying? Who I am now is going to dictate what I'm going to be like in that time. It may not bear fruit in this year, but it will. Like, if I'm neglectful in this or too much in this, it's all going to come back. I may not see it today, but you steer it off course 1 degree. You know, San Diego to Hawaii 1 degree, you ain't hitting Hawaii. It's too many. It's going to be too much over that course. We have got to stay the course. So I would argue that it is a greater feat to still be disciplined at 75 than it is at 15. At 15, he's like, this is all I know. This is what my parents told me to do. I'm going to do it. And it was beautiful and it was powerful. But I would argue 30-something years into my Christian faith, it's more important now that I be disciplined than it was when I got saved at 15, 16 years old. I was just dumb, and I'm not taking away from youthful faith. I love it. I'm so thankful I got saved young. I will never stop thanking God for that. I'm so thankful that God called Joy and I to the mission field when we were young. We would watch other older people come, older at that time was like 30, older. They were really old, And they were like, oh, I really miss this mayonnaise from America. And I'm like, yeah, I was 17 when I left America. I don't even know what I liked. Oh, I miss this. I don't miss it because I didn't have it. I miss I loved my car. Dude, I had a beater car. I was 17. I had a piece of junk. I don't care. None of that meant anything. I'm not saying it's better or worse. I'm saying I didn't have the struggles that some of those people had. They had lived a life. They had built up a reservoir of kind of expectation. The older we get, the more expectations we have. When you're 15, you have no expectations. You go talk to a group of 15-year-olds and say, God could use you to change the world. They'll believe it. Tell that to my age, and people are like, well, I'm set. I'll believe it for other people. So I'm saying that to all of us. Some of you are young. Some of you are, less young. Listen, you can still be immature. We can still vote for immaturity, right? So, but whatever age we are, purpose in your heart to follow the Lord. Make some simple decisions. Fast. Oh, whatever, I'm not allowed to fast. You can skip some things. No, I can't miss this thing. Dude, knock it off. You can skip some things. I'm not saying don't eat nothing and, grass like Nebuchadnezzar. You don't have to do that. I can't live without my coffee. Then try it for a day. And don't just moan and sit around and be like, it's the worst thing, feels stupid. No, don't, whatever. You could say that. But let me suggest something. The problem for so many of us is that discipline is the taking away of something, but not replacing it with something. So if you're going to fast, you're supposed to go seek God and pray. You don't just sit around and stare at a sandwich. If you do that, there's no fasting if you're just looking at it. You're like a dog waiting for the command. Bite, Go do something else. Go do something that is for the kingdom of God. Don't have a prayer meeting in your kitchen. Maybe you don't do that at all. Maybe that's the moment when you go for a nice walk and you say, I'm just going to pray. I'm not going to just listen to a podcast about the importance of discipline. Look, I can answer it for you. Just do it. But be disciplined. I think it would be good for us. It's good for us. It's easier to do when we're younger. It's harder the older we get. Let's just do it. Let's make it happen. Okay, I can take one question if anybody has no questions. Save them for next week. We'll do it next week. Some of you are not disciplined to be able to stay awake any longer. And so, no, just kidding. I'm just kidding. It's 8 o'clock. This was a long one, you guys. We just covered most of Daniel. Holy moly, you did amazing. Lord, thank you for your word. Help us to live lives where we purpose in our hearts to seek you first. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you so much for joining us, whether online or in person. We pray that the ministry of Calvary San Diego is encouraging you in your faith. If you would like to follow along with what we are doing or hear more teachings, you can do so by downloading the Calvary SD mobile or TV app. Also, if you would like to partner with us and worship through giving, you can do so at calvarysd.com/give. Thanks for tuning in.